World food prices reached a record high in March, according to the UN Food Agency. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is driving up costs worldwide. Both countries are major exporters of wheat, corn, barley, and sunflower oil. Sports gambling apps are betting against Tiger Woods winning the Masters this weekend. DraftKings says that it will lose millions of dollars if the golf legend wins the tournament. Now, fans have actually rallied around Woods, betting for his win with an average of 50-1 odds. The U.S. is banning Russian-imported gas, oil, and coal. President Joe Biden is set to sign an executive order enforcing the ban. The U.S. also imposed new sanctions on the world's largest diamond mining company, Russia's state-owned Alrosa. Well, the ruble took a massive hit when Russia invaded Ukraine, but now the currency appears to be bouncing back. With more on this, let's bring in Jane Foley. She's the head of Rabobank's foreign exchange strategy in London. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a topic that I'm really interested in because we've been talking now for the past several weeks about crippling sanctions that are going to shut down the Russian economy. And it seems like the ruble tanked and then it seems like it's rebounding. But I don't know a lot about currency. So let's just take it back. Let us just talk about how does the value of a currency change?
Well, this currency, you're quite right. It has moved back to the levels it was trading at against the US dollar before the war started. But we've got to remember this isn't really a proper market. We've got to remember there's been massive capital controls put in place by Russia. But also, of course, many people in the US and in Europe and elsewhere in the Allied world aren't actually allowed to trade the Russian ruble because of the sanctions. And by the same token, of course, Russia has banned foreigners from selling Russian assets. So there are many people, perhaps those 400 companies that have said they're pulling out of Russia, who would like to sell assets but can't. But for the time being, that signal, that stability in the Russian ruble is proving to be beneficial to the economy. People are putting money back. Russians are putting money back into their own banks. That is helping to support the Russian ruble. And the other factor is that the sales, of course, of gas and oil and coal is just bringing a lot more revenue into Russia.
Right. So this stabilization of the ruble is partially manufactured. So then my follow-up question is, how long can this happen? How long can the ruble stay sort of puffed up a bit?
Well, in a way, it depends on the sanctions. As long as the sanctions are in place, well, you know, the US and the Europeans can't sell those Russian assets that they've said that they want to sell. So it could be months, it could even be, you know, a few years. Similarly, if Russia maintains that ban on foreigners selling assets, it could be years before we can really get to grips with this market in the Russian ruble. But what we've got to remember, though, is that at the same time, they're still importing huge amounts of gas and oil, particularly into Europe, and that is getting Russia quite a lot of rubles in return, quite a lot of money, and that means that they're able to soften the blow to the economy. They're able to produce fiscal handouts to people, because this is a country which has been really entering what could be quite a deep recession.
Right, yeah, that's a great point, because if the Russian population isn't feeling it yet, then I don't know how well the sanctions are going to work. You know, you bring up Russian gas and oil. President Biden is set to sign an executive order banning Russian imports of oil and gas. Now, I know the U.S. is not sort of the biggest customer when it comes to this. Europe really is, which you've pointed out. So can, you know, a decision by the U.S. government to ban Russian oil and gas have an impact?
It's really only a signal. I mean, if we look about how much the US imports coal, well, it was only about 1% of its needs in 2020, and most of that came from Colombia and then Indonesia. Russia only a very tiny bit. So the US sanctions are much more powerful in other ways, not necessarily because of the imports of oil and coal, which are really very small. Japan, interestingly, today also went out and banned Russian coal. That is a bigger amount. They import a huge amount of commodities into Japan, and around about 11% of their coal comes from Russia. So that's a bigger hit, really, to Russian revenue. But it really is the Europeans that are in the position potentially to really hit revenue into Russia. But of course, there's this big dependency. It's very difficult to imagine that Europe can cut off all of the energy it takes from Russia without entering into stagflation or recession. There's a huge amount of German industry very reliant on Russian energy. And of course, Germany is one of the biggest economies in the world. So we could all feel the pain if
Hmm.
Germany went into recession.
Yep, they can't hurt Russia without hurting themselves to some degree. Jane Foley, thank you very much.